Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to be showing you how you can use the object menu. Actually it's the path menu, and we're going to use some of these settings right here. We're going to work with some paths, and we're going to create some shapes from other shapes. So we're not going to cover every single one of these, but we'll just, as we make this heart image, we'll use some of these tools right here, and then we'll even put a little bit of a gradient on it, so you'll kind of get the idea of how you can use gradients. So let's get started. The first thing that I want to do is I want to use, let me shrink this down a little bit so we can get our canvas closer to the center of the screen here. And we'll also look at, I'm going to keep this layers and objects panel open so that we can see the objects and the layers that they're in as we work. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get a circle. So this ellipse and arc tool, we'll select that, and then we'll come over here to the canvas, and whatever color is you have loaded, it'll be the last one you used. Mine's red, a version of red, and I'm going to come down here and change it to a bright red. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click down on the canvas, and then I'm going to hold down the Control and the Shift key, and I'm going to drag down and to the right at a 45-degree angle, and that's going to give me, actually I don't have to, holding down and Shift keeps it centered. You're basically pulling the circle out from a center spot. So we don't want to go too big, we just want to go about right there. So we have a basic circle. Now what we want to do is we want to duplicate this circle. So I'm going to hold down Control and hit Shift and D, or what you can do is you can select it and come up here to Object. I think it's Object, maybe it's Path. It's neither one of those. So you can tell I use the hotkeys a lot. If you right click it, maybe, right click. If you right click it in the context menu, you can hit duplicate, and that'll make a duplicate. And if you look over here in your layers panel, you'll see there's the first one, and then the one right above it is the duplicate. And the duplicate is on top, but if we click it, we don't really even have to click it. If it's got these arrows around it, you should be able to just hold down Shift and hit your right arrow and slide it to the right, and just keep sliding it to the right until it's just almost a separate object. We want it to overlap a little bit. Well, let me see, I'm going to count how many I do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that's about right. 7 will work. Yeah, 7. So, and then I'm going to click off of it. You can see there's the top of our heart. Now all we have to do is put a triangle here on the bottom. So how do you do that? Well, you come down here to the Polygon Tool, the Star and Polygon Tool, and what you'll want to do is make sure that the Polygon button is pressed. You don't want to have it on Star, otherwise you're going to get a different looking shape. And then we're going to change the corners to 3. So we want 3 corners on a polygon, and a three-corner polygon is basically a triangle. So if you click down and start dragging down and to the right as you hold down Control and Shift, it will do the same thing with, actually you pull straight down on a triangle, and what it does is it creates that triangle as an equilateral triangle, which is what we want. And you just set it to about that size, and then let off of all of your buttons. So it's okay if it's a little off like this one is, because what we can do is we can turn on snapping up here, right? And then we can just pull this out to the left and it'll snap to the edge. and we can pull this one to the right and it'll snap to that edge. And then we can just shorten up this bottom and make it look however we want. We could shorten it up until it lines up with this curve the way we want it to. And that might look a little, might have to drop it down just a tiny bit to make it fit. You can tinker with it here and there until you get it to fit the way you want it to look. But there we have our heart. However, if you look over here, it's basically just a bunch of stacked shapes. So what we want to do is turn this into one single shape. So if you just drag and select all three of them, or you can come over here and select the top one and hold down shift and select the bottom one. Either way, you'll select all of them. And once you get them all selected, you come up here to the path tool and you just hit the union. So what that does is it adds all of them together. And since they're different pieces, we're going to turn them into one visible item. And when you click this union button, you'll see over here now we have one single path. This is now one object. It's no longer three separate shapes, it's one shape. So we just added shapes together, three very simple shapes to make a shape that maybe would be very difficult to draw using the pen tool or some other method. This is a nice perfect shaped heart. But how can we add a little bit of depth to it? Right now it's kind of a two-dimensional heart, so what we want to do is change the color on it. And I'm going to come up here and go to the fill and stroke menu, and what we'll do is you can see that we can, this top row of tabs tells you whether or not you're working on the fill or the stroke, the color of the stroke, which is the outside edge. Like when you draw an image, you draw it with a pen and you make strokes, and then you fill it in with maybe a marker or a crayon or a colored pencil, and that's the fill. So you have a stroke, and this is the stroke color or the stroke paint, but then you have the stroke style, and you can set the width of the style, you can set it to be solid lines or dashes. You got a lot of different settings here that you can work with as far as the stroke style. We're not going to use either one of these in this video, but that just kind of gives you an idea of what this panel does. So the fill is what we want to work on. Now what kind of fill? Do we want a solid fill? A flat color? Do we want no fill? So if we click this X, watch what happens to the heart. It disappears. And it's not really disappeared, it's gone, but it just doesn't have anything, it's not colored in. So if we go back to the fill, the flat color, the flat color will turn it red again, and then you can adjust the color here, or like we're going to do, you can add a gradient. Now you have the linear gradient swatch right here, which will put a linear gradient on it. But I think for something that's round, if we want to give it depth, I want to use a radial gradient. And so I'm going to select radial gradient. And when we select the radial gradient, it's going to, by default, use the color that you have set at the time you select it. So it's going to be red, and then it's going to fade out into white. So you see that red's in the center, and it looks like it's fading out to white, but what's really happening is it's red on both ends. If you look over here in the fill and stroke menu, you've got solid red here, and you've got red with a transparency over here. This swatch, or this color stop, tells you that the color is set to red, but it's set to full transparency. And down here, that's what this is telling you. Here's the color, and we're on this stop, which is this one, See how this has the dot on it? That's the one you're looking at over here. It's also represented by this circle, and it's this color. This color has the hue, saturation, and lightness values, and then it's got an alpha that's pushed all the way up to 100. If you change the color stop and you click on this one and select it, now we're down here on this stop, and you'll see that the alpha is all the way down to 0. So what we want to do is we want to make a nice bright red, and as it goes to the edges we want it to get darker. So this red is fine for here, but we don't want this to be transparent. So let's take this with this selected, and you can select them right here too. This is a little bit bigger than clicking on the color stops like I did a minute ago. But if you click on this one and then turn up the opacity or the alpha, turn it all the way up to full red, now you just have what we had before. The only difference is you have two different colors that you're using to make it. So let's change this color stop, the one in the middle. Let's make it a little bit brighter. So select it and then take this lightness slider and just push it up a little bit. And as you go up, you'll see that that center starts lightening. So you can do it that way, or what you could do is, let's see here. This is 100, 50, and 100, so I want to set this back to 50 like it was. So what else you could do is just change the color of red that is being used for that center one. Maybe just let's take it all the way down here. Let's make it a little bit darker, or a little bit pinker maybe, and then lighten it up a little bit down here. And you see it's just a little bit different color. It's kind of a pinkish color red, and then this red out here we could maybe darken it up a little bit to create some more contrast. So now you have kind of a glow in the middle of the heart. But what if we wanted it up here on this, coming from up and to the left? Well, we can manage the gradient by coming over here and clicking this icon right here, the gradient tool. It's kind of counterintuitive because you're setting the colors for the gradient and you turn it on over here, but then you work with it over here. So if you click this button, see how it gives you the controls, and you can take, this is where it originates from, and it's going out in two different directions because it's a radial gradient. You can squish one down and make one longer to make it an oval shaped gradient, but we want the round one, so I'm going to leave those the way they are. I'm going to drag this square right up here in this upper left hand edge, and then I'm going to rotate this around, and I'm just going to pull this down, and I'm going to pull this one out like that. Now obviously you can set this however you want it, wherever you want it. You could even make it off of the object itself if you wanted to. It doesn't even have to be on the object. But I'm going to leave mine just right about there. And then I can click that, and there you have kind of a 3D looking heart. Gradients don't really make it look 3D, but it adds a little bit of depth. It gives you the impression that that's a rounded surface that's on the front of the heart. So that's a little bit about how you can use basic shapes to make more complex shapes by adding them together. We only really used one of these in this video, but you could experiment with some of these other ones. They're kind of tricky. The difference one, if you take two shapes and add them together, well, not add them together, but let's I'll just show you how that one works. If I drag out a rectangle like this, and then I drag out another rectangle like that, and then I take, this is kind of something that's important if you're going to do this one. If you're going to use the differences, well, first you don't want snapping turned on if you want to position it. I'm going to use two different colors so we can see what's going on here. So this yellow one, if you look up here in the layers and objects panel, this is rectangle 4 and it's on top of rectangle 3. Path 1 is our heart that we finished, and we're going to move it up there. So if you just take one shape and put it on top of another shape like this, then you have the two shapes. You just select both of them. Now we have both of these shapes selected. When you come up here to do a difference, the shape that's on top is going to punch a hole in the shape that's on the bottom. So it's kind of like a cookie cutter. You take the cookie cutter, you put it on top of what you're cutting, and you push it through. And then when you pull the cookie cutter out, everything that was under the cookie cutter is gone, right? And you have the difference between what it was and what the cookie cutter covered. And that's what we're doing here. So if we come up here and we do path and hit difference, it just punches out where everything that overlapped on the yellow and the red. So that's the difference path. That's how you do differences. We did a union already when we did the heart. So we have this yellow one, and let's do this circle. And I want to make this circle a certain color. Let's make it anything other than yellow. We'll make it purple. So we can see that it's on top of the yellow one, right? So what's the next one in the, if you come up here to paths, and let's say we do the intersection. So here's what's going to happen with this one. Everything that, all the space that the two objects share is what's going to be left, because it's the intersection. Wherever they intersect is what you're going to see. And there we have a yellow half circle, because only half of the circle was under the, or was over the rectangle. So that is the, that's the intersection. The exclusion is the opposite of intersection. So I'm just going to back up to where we had the circle and that, and we're just going to do the same thing, only we're going to use the exclusion. Now this one's kind of odd. What it does is it excludes everything that overlaps and keeps everything that was different. So everything that was different is what it keeps. So let's back up and do the next one. Exclusion, division. This is going to this is going to create two different, first we have to select them both. So let's select both of these, and we'll just come up here and, rather than me explaining it, so we divided, we still have two paths, right? But everywhere that the purple was touching is now a separate, it's kind of like the difference, but it leaves what you would normally, it does the same thing as this, only it leaves the piece that you cut out in there. So that is the, sometimes that's what you want to do. You want to cut a chunk out of an existing shape and keep it and use it for something. That's what you want to reach for. So the next one is the cut path. Now this one, I can't remember what this one does. I don't use this one hardly ever. So we it just cuts. That's interesting. Everywhere it intersected, it kept the path. So you see here, this circle was on the outside edge of this, and so it kept that little part where they shared, but it's only on the outside edge. I wonder if it'll keep 2 if we put it over 2 of them. Let's see. Path, cut path. Wait, is that what we did before? No, yeah, path, cut path. Oh, I only have one selected. You got to have both selected or it won't work. You can't add 2 things when you only have one selected. So cut path. Yeah, it looks like now we have 2 paths, or it's 1 path. Actually, it's 4 paths. So let's turn the stroke on those and see what it does. Okay, so everywhere the circle was, we basically used the edge of the circle to cut out. We basically used the edge of the circle to cut out to section the rectangle. So this circle basically chopped the outside, what would be the stroke. It gets rid of the fill when it does it, but it keeps this as its own piece. It keeps the yellow edge underneath this part as its own piece, and then it keeps these squared ends as their own pieces. So if you ever want to get a path off of a shape, you could do it using that one. That's one of the reasons why I don't use it very often, or I don't ever remember using it at all, is because I don't really ever have a need for that. But you get the idea. These path operations basically do different things to paths, and when you start getting down here on these ones that don't have fill on them, see how all these are filled in? That means you're going to have some fill left over. But down here, they basically do the same things, but they only leave you with strokes. They leave you with individual paths when you're done. So, and you could come down here to, you could just test all these out and see what they do and see if you get the results that you're after. But that's a basic practical demonstration of how you can create these complex shapes using simple shapes just by using the path operations in the path menu in Inkscape. I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.